and hear the words of Sennacherib, which he has sent to mock the living God. Truly, O Lord, the kings of Assyria have laid waste the nations and their lands, and have cast their gods into the fire. For they were not gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore they were destroyed. So now, O Lord our God, save us, please, from this hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you, O Lord, are God alone. Hezekiah prays that prayer, and God himself destroyed the Assyrian army. One night, 185,000 soldiers in the Assyrian army die. They wake up the next morning and find them. And you know, it's interesting, one of the prophets of Israel had said that in the way they have come down here, they're going to go back and follow their own trail out of here. The very next morning, they followed their own trail back out of there when they see all the dead bodies around them, for the Almighty God has provided for Hezekiah. And he's brought about a great victory. Well, unfortunately, the next guy in line would be his son Manasseh. And the scripture tells us that Manasseh, his son, was an evil king. And 2 Kings 21 carries a story. You can look that up on your own time. I won't go to the time to read it today, but it tells us of his evil, of how evil he was, and he says even more evil than any of the kings before him. This guy's a rat. He obviously didn't learn much from his father, especially after seeing it. I suppose that made him feel powerful because God had so intervened on their behalf. But God sends Isaiah to tell Manasseh that God will use the Babylonians as his tool of judgment. We find that in Isaiah chapter 3, that whole story. And Judah was warned of exile and is promised that they will return to their homeland as a purified nation. Isaiah is amazing in his proclamation of what is about to happen. And if I can find that, Isaiah chapter 14 is where I'm going. And verses 1 through 4, we read these words, "For the Lord will have compassion on Jacob, and will again choose Israel, and will set them in their own land. And sojourners will join them, and will attach themselves to the house of Jacob, and the people will take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel will possess them in the Lord's land as male and female slaves. They will take captives those who were their captors, and rule over them who oppressed them." Isaiah is given some very bright news. In fact, Isaiah is a very long prophet, his book in the Bible, and it gives a lot of very positive news to this kingdom of Judah. Even though they're about to be destroyed, he's saying, hey, don't let that get you down too bad, because God's going to do great things to you. In fact, because of his promise to King David, he's going to use you to bring about the Messiah. The Messiah will come through Judah. God keeps his promise, and indeed he does. Judea will not be disappointed, he says. Verse 49, or chapter 49, I'm just going to pull out a couple of these, and then I'm going to get on to something else. If I went into all the scriptures that are listed with this, we'd be here 10 hours, and I hope to do it here in 10 minutes. But chapter 49 and verse 23 tells us, "Kings shall be your foster fathers, and their queens your nursing mothers. With their faces to the ground they shall bow down to you and lick the dust from your feet. Then you will know that I am the Lord. Those who wait on me shall not be put to shame. He's given them some very positive news. This isn't going to last forever. God's going to restore it, and Judah will be a blessing to the whole world. Isaiah tells us, though, that it was never fulfilled as a mighty nation again. They re-inhabited the land. In fact, they have done so many times since then, and even now. But they were never a mighty nation again. When they come back into the land before Jesus, they're first of all subjects to Greece, and then following that to the Romans. So they've never been a strong, mighty nation again. However, he had a lot of promises to them, and one of the most familiar one to us is Isaiah chapter 53. You might be familiar with this. Who has believed what the Lord heard from us? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before him like a young plant, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no former majesty that we should look to him, and no beauty that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised and esteemed not him. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace. And with his wounds we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb he was led to the slaughter, and like a sheep before his shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. As for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living, stricken for the transgressions of my people. And they made his grave with the wicked, with a rich man his death, although he had done no violence, and there was no deceit in his mouth. Yet it was the will of the Lord to crush him. He has put him to grief, and his soul makes an offering for guilt. He shall see his offspring and shall prolong his days. The will of the Lord shall prosper in his hands. Out of the anguish of his soul we shall be satisfied. By his knowledge shall the righteous one, my servant, make many to be accounted righteous, and he shall bear the iniquities. Therefore I will divide him a portion with the many, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his soul to death, and was numbered with the transgressors. Yet he bore the sin of many, and makes intercession for the transgressors. Now that's a lot of words, and we've heard them before, but who could read those words and not think of everything we know about Jesus, and not put that together in the fulfillment? 700 years before Jesus walked the earth, Isaiah told that. And I'm going to bore you to death with some facts, simply because this impressed me. This is what Isaiah has to say concerning the Messiah. That he's the coming Messiah, that he will have a virgin birth, that the Messiah would minister in Galilee, that the Messiah's deity and eternal throne, he would speak of the Messiah's suffering, he would speak that the Messiah would die with sinners, that the Messiah would be buried in a rich man's tomb, which he was. Remember, Joseph of Arimathea said, hey, can I take the body and put him in my tomb? That the Messiah's rule would be both mighty and gentle, that the Messiah would be a righteous king, that the Messiah would be just and kind, that the Messiah would rule over not only Israel, but over the Gentiles as well, that the Messiah would have great influence, that idols would disappear, that under the Messiah's rules there would be no more war, that death would be destroyed, that God's people would receive a new name, that they would be a new heaven and a new earth, and that the righteous and wicked would be eternally separated. Now, I can give you the verse references if you want them. I have them here. But read Isaiah. You're going to hear he says all of those things about the Messiah, as though he's crowning him as King Jesus 700 years before he ever existed. Well, we have a simple challenge to live the motto, no king but King Jesus. Jesus exhorted us, but seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. He tells us that in Matthew 6:33. The USA is a nation among nations. As a people, we must seek God and obey God's will. It's easy to make it about our nation and them, whoever they and them are. But we have to stop complaining about how everyone and everything is going to hell in the handbasket. Because it is. And there's nothing we're going to do about it. It will not change by waiting on them to change. It will change, and God will again bless us only when we individually make Jesus King of our lives and live like he is king. I have a video that I have decided to show you. A few years ago, I went down to the Renew Conference, which is a discipleship forum at discipleship.org in Nashville. And at that conference, I heard Mark Moore speak. And he was impressive, I got to tell you. I knew of Mark Moore because he had been Josh Clark's professor at Ozark Christian College. And he was a good man, and he taught a program on hermeneutics that I really loved, and we learned a lot from that. But since then, Mark has left Ozark Christian College, and he went off to a small church in Peoria, Arizona, called Christ Church of the Valley. It has a Maricopa campus. Carolyn and I attended it one Sunday. Yeah, a little church there that's an extension of Christ Church of the Valley. But this little church that Mark Moore is preaching at is a small one. It's only 49,000 people. But he is now a teaching pastor there, and he has some mighty things to say about King Jesus I'd like to share with you just now, because it sets the tone for what I think this message says.
How does faith respond to the enthronement of Jesus? That's an interesting question. Because we're not merely asking what faith is or how to have a relationship with Jesus. We're asking how the church, the book of Acts, book of Revelation, responded to Jesus' enthronement, his resurrection, his ascension, his being seated at the right hand of the Father. That's a great question. And I want to give a short answer and then unpack it in two specific ways. The short answer is this: faith responds to Jesus' enthronement by faithfulness and by fulfilling the Great Commission with compassion, hope, and worship, despite difficult circumstances. That's the short answer. I want to unpack it in two specific ways. First, years ago I did a study on all the commands of Jesus. Jesus' Great Commission, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you. I came up with 107 commands looking at all the imperatives of Jesus to his disciples. And I categorized them. Some of them were very simply be with Jesus or follow me, believe in me. It's about presence and relationship. Some of them were about religious ritual, prayer, fasting, giving. But there's one category that really caught my eye because it is the only category in which the church today is doing a better job of the church of the first century. Now that should catch your attention because we are a restoration movement. We want to go back to the New Testament and find the authentic, original church of Jesus Christ. You know what that one command is? To care for those who are ostracized. Women, children, ethnic outsiders, those that are sinners and tax collectors and prostitutes. Jesus did that all throughout his ministry. But there's very little evidence of the church in the book of Acts doing that. Now, I'm sure they did, but the evidence is not recorded in the book of Acts, except for scant circumstances. Chapter 2, chapter 4, the book of Acts, you see the church giving, even selling off property and giving that funds to take care of the needy. But that was the Jerusalem church within ethnic Israel. When you start crossing other geographic or ethnic lines or economic lines, there's not a lot of documentation of it happening. But I can document today foster care, after-school programs, boys and girls clubs, types of programs, hospitals, medical care, literacy for women. In the last 250 years, the church has done more to alleviate poor in this world than virtually all other organizations combined. We've done an amazing job. And we don't get enough credit on the major news outlets of what God is doing through God's people, for people who are not God's people. And that's one thing that would really stand out as expressing our faith in Jesus Christ. Here's another thing. If you look at the book of Revelation, yeah, it is about the end of time. It's about Jesus coming back and God making the world aright again. I get it. But in the center lane of Revelation, it's not about eschatology or end times. It is about Jesus. Chapter 1, chapter 5, chapter 19, all give a portrait of the exalted Christ. And what is interesting to me about that portrait in Revelation is each of these portraits precedes a particularly difficult season of the church. Chapter 1, you have the exalted Christ, the great high priest, before the 7 letters to the 7 churches, all of whom, or most of whom, needed a word from the Lord. Then you get in chapter 5, the lion and the lamb scene in heaven that precedes the tribulation on earth. And then chapter 19, you see the exalted warrior, the returning Christ, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, preceding the judgment scenes of chapter 20, 21, and 22, both hell, or the lake of fire, and the new heaven and the new earth. What I draw from that is, if we are going to faithfully live our faith, representing Jesus on this earth, we had better have a clear view of who Jesus is. Because it is only the portrait of Jesus, the reality of the exalted Christ, that will get us through the tribulation times that we will face. What does faithful faith look like? Facing opposition with a clear view of Jesus in mind. That will take you clear to the end.
That will take you clear to the end, he says. You know, I don't know if you caught this, American Heritage girls and boys' life. You're doing a better job than they did in the first century is what he was saying. He was giving the church credit for great things. When we make Jesus king, then we will make a difference in our family. Our family will make a difference on our block. And our block will make a difference in our town. Our town will make a difference in our county. And our county will make a difference in our state. And our state will make a difference in the U.S. But it starts with you. Each of you individually making Jesus king of your life. And it doesn't happen in here. It happens when you go out those back doors and take him into the world. That's what you've been called to do by King Jesus. Sounds like a simple calling, doesn't it? It's a mighty one. And nobody is insignificant. Some are called to leadership. Some do more things than others. But everybody is called to that simple mission of taking Jesus out those doors with you. It begins with putting Jesus. You can come back up. I didn't give you a cue. It begins with you putting Jesus on the throne of your life through repentance and the coronation ceremony of baptism into Christ, and then living out the motto, no king but King Jesus. How about you? What decision will you make today? We're going to have a simple invitation. You'll have time to come and express that. Maybe some just need a prayer. We've got Carl here and David who could help me and pray with you. Maybe somebody needs to place a membership and become a part of this body, or maybe commit your life to Christ. Make him king and be baptized. I don't know what your decision is, but join me if you'll stand and we'll sing, I have decided